give you guys a quick show at it. I've been working on it for about a little shy of a year now. Hi, I'm Matt Switlick. I'm a member of a hackerspace in Ferndale called I3 Detroit.
Okay.
About 9 months ago, a guy who had been a FIRST Robotics instructor who was part of the group, and I lamented about how much we hated BattleBots. BattleBots is $1,000 doorstops running into another $1,000 doorstop, and people call them robots, and it's pissed me off for about a decade now. On the flip side of things, FIRST Robotics, back when I was a FIRST Robotics student over 12 years ago, they were fully RC cars, but that's what the technology. We didn't have Raspberry Pis. We didn't have cheaper microcontrollers. So what we talked about was the idea that there's robot building competitions, and that's what FIRST does. And FIRST even has a, now I believe the first 30 seconds of a FIRST robotics competition is autonomous. I don't know if anyone's had more recent experience. They change the rules every year with FIRST Robotics. They play a different game. So the first 30 seconds now is autonomous. But BattleBots is still a bunch of jackasses with RC car controllers ramming into each other. So we said, you know what, screw building the robot. That's not the hard part. Like, we've done that. Anyone with a good mechanical workshop can pump out a robot. What we want is something where it's about the code, not about building the chassis. So what I've put together is a game that we're calling Robot Knife Fight. Now this is one of the small proto-robots. Basically what it works on is there's an Arduino, which like the Raspberry Pi, it's a cheap little computer. However, the Raspberry Pi is like a gigahertz or something like that. An Arduino is, I believe, 20 megahertz. Okay,
wow.
Its RAM is 4K, right? Its RAM is 4K, and its programming memory, like the NVRAM you write to, I believe, is 32K. But the Arduino, if you want to call it an operating system, but their bootloader is, I believe, 1 or 2K. So you have 30K of programming space that you can actually work with. Now we call it Robot Knife Fight because normally you can see down here, they have balloons on them. What the? All right, this is an early video of a different symbol system. Originally I was playing around with tracking LEDs. What we have is we have a camera above the arena, and the camera looks down on top. Now, like I said, this is an early video where I was trying to fish out the little triangle of LEDs on each of them. What we've gone to is using actual symbols. So on the top of the one I have in my hand are these symbols that are called fiducials. They look basically like weird little amoebas, and they're all numbered. So this is the fiducial for number 0. This is the fiducial for number 5, and there's 255 of them possible. So what that project was about was a musical sequencer.
Could you hold it so we could hold it so the top is facing us? Okay, thank you.
So the first piece of open source software we utilized was this Ractivision, because it can go into a camera feed and find these symbols. Now this is just an interim, temporary solution. We're going to be replacing these with full-blown QR codes. We just started closing in on the deadline of the Maker Faire and go with what works, not with what is theoretically perfect. So what this does is this is an EXE you run, and it looks at a webcam looking for these symbols, and it says symbol 0 is at this position, and it's rotated in this direction, right? Then you slide it to a different part, and what it actually does is it does like a MIDI sequencer interface, so you can have symbols representing drum beats and that kind of stuff. That was the goal of this project. So I took his code, which outputs the data via a protocol called TUIO. I think it's like a descendant of MIDI, but I'm not 100% on that. So it talks on port 3333. Then my Python script goes to that port and gets the stream of data. Does some math to adjust, so that you're working on a like 255, rather than tell you what pixel out of thousands, I scale back the arena. And then the Python script talks to a transmitter Arduino, which then talks to each robot has a really, really cheap radio and radio receiver on it. So these are 433 megahertz. They're just like your garage door opener. There's not it's one way only. So the robots don't transmit anything. They just listen to a continuous serial stream that says, Robot 0 is at this position in this spacing. Robot 2 is at this position in this spacing. And what the software does is it looks for the symbol, the second symbol. Normally there's a balloon. You can see a remnants of one that it was popped here. The balloon holds down the power button, and then the robot is on. So when you pop the balloon, the power switch goes off, and the robot is dead in the water. And so what you do is you pair a couple of symbols together. So this symbol tells me that Robot 0 is dead in the arena, so that you don't go backing into him. Because as you can see from the pictures, this is where the knife fight part comes in. Yeah. So this is one of the sharp pin-like maces that I put on the front part of this to be able to pop the balloon on the back of it. So basically what it is it's a coding competition, not a robot building competition. You got very limited constraints. You got 30K. My practice code, which just bumps in, like it has two physical bump sensors on the front, and there's one last hardware modification I'm going to be doing. The weapon itself is not a bump sensor. I've decided I'm going to, after getting stabbed in the ankle several times, I've decided to actually modify that. And add one more bump sensor to it, and then we're at version 1.0 of the hardware. The hardware will be locked. There's a couple more server updates I'd like to do, but we already have all the code available on GitHub. So Ractivision's the only piece you have to download other than the Robot Knife Fight repo on GitHub. In here we have the 3D model files. So it uses Google SketchUp, which isn't Google SketchUp anymore. I don't know who bought it, but they've been given a life preserver. But it's a free 3D modeling software that you can use to edit the files if you want to use this as a basis for another robotic platform. Almost all of the parts are documented in it. Soon all of them will be, and I'll be hounding people at who have current access to a laser cutter to get a couple more of these cut out. So the 3D model's available, the source code for everything. Here's the Python for the arena, some calibration scripts and that kind of stuff. And then a couple of practice scripts, keyboard, a piece of Python that outputs some key commands for like radio control, driving it for testing. And then if you haven't seen the Arduino IDE, this is where the Arduino is a really, really good step up from things like the Lego robotics, right? This is, if you got it, somebody who's interested in this stuff, where to start is always a problem, and if you sit them down in front of a professional embedded system IDE, they're probably going to get lost. Arduino is really straightforward on it. This is a piece of example code that I have that, in the beginning, I just define what servo positions are, fully forward and fully backward. This library actually does things based on timing on the servo. So you got between 1 second and 2 seconds, depending on how long that pulse is. That's what's actually determining the forward or reverse throttle of the servo. But if you actually get into the Arduino, if you've gotten to the point where you've made the LED on it blink at different speeds, that's really all you need to do to be able to get become a player in this. All we're going to be doing is I'll be giving out a example robot code that'll allow you to have it bounce around the arena. Right now this is dumb. All it will do is bump into something and then flail in that direction, then turn back up, turn away, and go. And I have some code where it'll avoid the actual walls of the arena. So ideally, if I hit something with a bump sensor, it's not a wall, that means it's an enemy, kill it, right? And so that's the end of its thought process. It's not targeting an enemy or anything like that. However, you can, because you're going to have serial data where you know where your robot is. And there's no feedbacks written, so like I'm not accounting for wheel slippage. There's a lot of room for where this code could be optimized, but you only got 30K. And I think that's where the fun's going to come into this, because especially embedded development systems, I had a bug where I told it to go forward for 45,000 microseconds, not realizing that the container was a signed integer, 16-bit. So I could only go as high as 32, so actually I gave it a negative number. And it just took that number and kept on doing what it does. You don't get sort of like, error, that didn't make sense, I don't know what you're going to do. It's brutal when you go past your memory pointer. It just keeps going. It keeps executing whatever it finds. So yeah, basically that's the short of it. We'll be doing a event. There's another member of i3Troy who has a art gallery where I'm going to be fighting a handful of these on the 25th of this month, the last Saturday. People are more welcome to come by that. And then probably in about a month or so, I'll have the final hardware done, all the files up for people to laser cut their own. You don't have to buy a kit from me or anything like that. We will be doing shields because that'll make it a little less work wiring it versus just soldering onto a pre-done PCB for the little bit of custom electronics. Basically, the only thing I added was the 433 megahertz radio and then a couple of easy connectors so that you don't plug power in backwards and that kind of stuff. Runs off of 4 AA batteries. We made holes for rotary encoders, but we're not going to do that at this point because the whole point of this phase is to keep this cheap. This is our first game. This is the game that we want to get people hooked on. Then once we go from this, the next phase is instead of robot knife fights, robot gunfight. You take things like the Raspberry Pi, where now I got a gigahertz, now I got a USB port, now I got a webcam. That's the big one, right? And basically I'm going to let another year go by, let the Raspberry Pi and its competitors. There's a couple other projects too, the BeagleBone, and sadly it's a .NET thing, but they're quite powerful. There's these things called Fez Dominoes, Fez Pandas. They have a lot of oomph underneath them too. I've seen them take webcam data and throw it out via Wi-Fi. So there's a handful of embedded systems that are all going to start competing for each other. And this is we're going to win on this one because this is less than 50, 60 bucks retail, right? Like go buy the Arduino at Micro Center for $35 retail. Buy everything retail, right? You're going to get a little less than 60 bucks for one of these. The Arena hardware doesn't add more than maybe another 75. The whole point of this is that the game with 2 robots is under 200 bucks to deploy, so it's less than an Xbox is sort of like my target goal here. So keeping it cheap allows it to be reproduced by other people in multiple places. So i3 Detroit is a hackerspace in Ferndale, but we have a good relationship with All Hands Active in Ann Arbor, Hack Pittsburgh, Hive 13, I believe they're in Canada. All these guys at Maker Fairs who were part of the other groups looked in and go, when are you doing the fight? And here's the best part. So if you're not even interested in programming it, say that's not my thing, even if you want to watch it, we'll be Ustreaming the whole thing. So ideally, you don't have to come here to compete. You can be in Grand Rapids, you can be anywhere, and when we do Fight Night, just email me the most recent file, and I'll upload that into it. Eventually, we'll be writing software to streamline that, so I don't have to know you gave me a new version of software. You'll just go into your GitHub account or whatever and upload the newest version, and before each match, it'll go and fetch it. Now that's the last bit of it. We fight the standard robot, not your robot, okay? So there will be 2 to 4 robots in an arena, and you won't know which one is going to get your code until a matter of minutes. We're going to literally be getting roll of dice to determine whose code goes on what chassis. So it's ideally you design to spec and then just hope that your robot, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure, because my code could just as easily wind up randomly on any given hardware. So.
Can anyone spectate this, or do you got to be an i3 Detroit?
No, and this is open to anybody. This is we built this at i3 Detroit, and I built this with a bunch of other i3 Detroit members, but I've had people who are not i3 Detroit members come in and kind of work on it, play with it, and we're open for the competition. It was made there, but it has nothing to do with the organization. Just like normally with i3 Detroit, you don't ever have to be a member to be there. You can just come on by and hang out for a bit and just get a feel for the place if you want. When we do this actual event, it'll be publicly open.
I thought there had to be a member there to say you're a visitor and that sort of thing. I didn't think.
Yeah, well, it's a workshop with sharp tools, so we have you sign a waiver saying you're not gonna take a hammer and drop it on your foot and sue us. But that's the only thing is you got to have the legal disclaimer, and that's about it. That's our only requirement. So when we do the day, there'll be the little table. You have to sign the waiver saying you're not going to pick a hammer and hurt yourself.
So you're going progressing the gunfights. When are you going to progress the missiles?
I would argue the plastic BB is a missile. So yeah, one of the big things with going to the next phase of it is the arena to keep people from getting hit with them. We could take these out into the woods and have some goggles, right? And hope for the best. But yeah, no, airsoft will come in the later versions. But we need more oomph for that. The Arduino is, like I said, only 20 megahertz, and one of the things I really like with this is because it is only 30K, like my example bump sensor code with a bunch of serial debugging data in takes up 10 out of that 30K. So I don't really have, like, you're going to have to start being like, oh, I'm going to take out all this stuff, I don't need that, find a way to do this in less instructions. And that's what's really missing in my mind from a lot of like programming, because we have infinite resources. I have 16 gigs of RAM, like I care if there's a memory leak. It'll take 6 months for it to become apparent anyways. So getting people in the habit of remembering what a buffer overflow physically is an advantage of this platform. So, but like I said, I want to move to later versions where we will use things like Raspberry Pis with a native Linux distribution in it, because we'll need it at that point. But yeah.
Laser pointers instead of pins.
Especially the green ones that can pop balloons. Problem is you have to have all the goggles for everybody. But still.
They're only $300.
Yeah. No, there's been some other talk about other games that involve things like squirt guns, because, you know, fire would be a lot of fun. There's definitely some talk on having some flame-throwing versions of this. The rules for BattleBots were originally, I believe, no non-tethered projectiles, but I never saw anyone with an interesting tethered projectile. No flames. Come on! Like, how are these things supposed to fight? I understand they ban you for having too many sensors on those damn things. So if I take one of these and have it drive itself with some kind of local feedback loop, they'll ban you from most of those BattleBot fighting leagues. So yeah, this is sort of my dig at them.
Number next, you said that the wheels were cut by a laser cutter.
Yeah.
Was that at i3 Detroit where you guys have the laser cutter?
Yes,
Did you do that, or?
we did have a laser cutter. i3 Detroit is run by its membership. A good number of the tools there are owned by an individual member. Now, we do have some tools that we own as a group, but we've only been around for 2 years, so it's not a lot of stuff that's been accumulated. Our bandsaw is lock, stock, and barrel of the organizations. It was donated to us. But the laser cutter belonged to a particular member who moved out of the region or something like that, and sold it. And it was an older, very large model, and it was starting to get to the point where it's actually not cutting all the way through things reliably. And if I have to go and trace back with a scroll saw, it completely defeats the purpose of it to me. So about 90% of this was laser cut. You can see the parts with the dark burns on it versus the ones that don't. So I've done a lot of manual, like, you know, seeing what fits, then I go back and make the 3D model for it. The laser, we are trying to fund a laser cutter at i3. We needed about $7 grand to get the laser cutter, and we are at 6 out of the $7 grand. So we're pretty close to having access to one. I want to get this done sooner than later, but there are other areas. If you're down in Ann Arbor, there is MakerWorks, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
They, I believe, have one there, and I don't know exactly their membership model. There's also, if you're looking to do larger numbers of volumes, there's Tech Shop. And I know some people at Tech Shop, I might have them cut out a lot of those. The nice thing about Tech Shop is Tech Shop would be when you want to start making thousands of something, Tech Shop's your place. That's a place where you can go pay a membership fee, take a tooling class, and get access to machines that could stamp out, a dozen of these at a time. So little orders of magnitude. I'm not at that point where I want to make thousands of these quite yet, but getting there. Thank you. Yeah, and like I said, we're looking for applicants. Anyone who's interested in fighting them, you don't even have to be there when we actually do the fighting. Although I'm going to be doing some events probably on like a Saturday or Sunday at i3 where you can come down and test against actual hardware and help us review it, because like I said, we're in version 0.9, right? I got one more hardware change to do with this, and then we're going to rubber stamp it and say this is going to be what we're going to fight for the next 6 months or whatever.
On August 25th, that's when Barcamp Grand Rapids is. You said that you're going to be doing a demo or?
Yeah, I got some promo flyers. Can you hand me that stack of stuff?
I was wondering if that's something that you could stream from your demo that you're going to be doing to Barcamp.
I'll have to find out exactly. I haven't been to this location. So far, I've demoed this at Maker Faire and Penguicon in like the hallway back in the corner. I have not done a official like fight. I've only had basically the people who've been helping design this have made it bounce around. And I also learned that it's better in the public presentation for them to kind of fight randomly rather than actually fight intentionally, because you can't have to keep bending over and reloading the balloons, and it gets tiring after a while when they kill each other too fast. But I have little flyers for the art show exhibit. It's called Detroit Love Robots. It's August 25th. In addition to fighting robots, there will be some 8-bit music. I don't know if you're familiar with the term chiptunes, but it's basically electronic music composed on like Game Boys. They actually modify Game Boy cartridges to be musical instruments, and they were also at Maker Faire, and their performance should be pretty awesome. So if anyone wants a flyer, I'll have those about. And anything else?
So, if I could just recap, you said a lot in the last.
Oh, sorry.
So you got this thing here that moves around in an arena.
Yeah.
And you
pull
got
a picture of the arena
you've
real
got
quick.
a camera above that can read this symbol.
Yep. So
that camera's feeding back to a computer that's.
So here you
interpreting
can
that?
see the laptop running the Racktivision library,
Right.
and the 2 robots in the arena. The tripod, actually you can't see the camera above it. You need
I
at
see
least
the tripod,
a
right.
720p capable webcam.
Okay.
You have to have a certain number of pixels for this stuff to work. That's one of the reasons I want to move to QR codes. Is QR codes have built-in error correction, so I have a feeling I can get better tracking results. Right now I can give you your position if you're still, like if you're not moving, I believe 8 times a second. If you start moving, and these don't even move that fast as you kind of saw from that video, I'll lose track of you. The software that we're using is not meant for tracking moving objects.
Okay.
It's about giving a position of stationary objects.
But-
So you just have to write your code to deal with that initially.
So you've got a receiver on here. That's what this antenna is.
Yep.
And it's receiving a signal of its location and the enemy's location.
Yep, of every robot in the arena's location.
so
Now
there
here's
could
a
be-
picture of
there could be lots
the
of
tripod. You can see a little webcam. It's just a standard $15 at Micro Center 720p capable. Winbook webcams are awesome. They're cheap, and I've had really good experience with them. I use a standard tripod, but yeah, I made another one of these just out of a 2x4 and a piece of dowel rod and that kind of stuff.
So the robot, knowing where it is and where its opponents are, will make corrective maneuvers to go seek out and pop the balloon on one of the other robots.
And for coding development, like I said, these are real cheap, about $60 a widget. I left a FTDI header so that you can add a little development radio to it. You could use an XB, or this is actually a Bluetooth. It's called a Bluetooth mate. So I can actually drive this with my phone if I actually had the debugging radio on it. And then, like I said, that's a $65 development radio Alpha SparkFun. So I make that as an optional thing. I only plug it on there when I'm like, what are you thinking? I don't understand what's going wrong. So you write a little bit of debug code.
It'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. So I left hardware spots for what I viewed to be the
So you
basic
got,
issues.
You got 30K of RAM to run your program.
You can see it's in a little plastic dome. Keep beer and stuff spilled off of it. That's my transmitter Arduino, and we currently have 4 of these proto robots. And then you can see the arena. The arena is 4 foot by 6 foot. It is that size because that fits in the back of my minivan. I've learned to not build prototypes bigger than you can transport. It's a hard lesson learned.
Sure.
Well, how does it actually communicate? Is that Bluetooth or, I mean, just
Well,
standard, it's not standard
No,
wireless?
it uses a 433 megahertz radio, which is basically the same thing as your garage door opener.
Okay,
The
that's-
data sheet for
okay,
these
you said that.
radios,
I didn't
basically
pick
we're
that up.
listing
Okay.
how to like piggyback Sears garage door systems and that kind of thing. Let's see. So yeah, that's the tripod, the Bluetooth radio. Here's a picture of them with some early shields, and you can see the Arduinos on top of them. I'm using Unos in all of them, but it really wouldn't matter what Arduino you stuck on it. In theory, you could buy the Arduino Mega, which is more megahertz, more RAM, and a hell of a lot more I/O pins, and you could run this code on it. I don't know if you'd really have an advantage from it.
Can we see a real quick?
Bigger program.
So the goal is to seek out and pop the balloons of the
Yes,
opponents.
be
until you're
the last
one.
man standing. And then the chassis, if you just maybe interested in it as just a beginning robot chassis, it's hard to see on the projection, but this is a IR sensor that I put on a sub-micro servo. So I played around the early versions of having a localized sensor that can sweep back and forth and tell distance. Problem is the servos $8, and the IR sensor's another 12. Now I just went from $60 a bot to $80 a bot. So the idea again was to put the positioning and the expensive stuff up in and centralize it so it all is run on the laptop and keep things as cheap as possible. And you don't really need that because once I know where my symbol is, I should be able to figure out where I am in the map. And like everybody gets the same data, so it's not like it's a personalized. I'm talking to robot 0 only. Everyone hears the
For
same.
the broadcast, everybody gets the same stream.
Exactly.
You listen for what you're interested in.
Does it tell you which way you're facing to?
Yes, with 16 degrees of accuracy.
Really?
We had 24 bits to fit the data in, which is why I'm not using raw pixels when I'm telling them where they are. So I only had 3 bits, I only had a couple of bits left over. I believe they have sharp things on them. This is actually I think the very first test run of it when it was using dumb bumper code. I also played around with having an RGB LED on the top of it. Lesson I learned is it's not as easy to track colors using the OpenCV framework. Hey! There we go, and the green did. So, and these, like I said, these are just dumb ROMs. It's just still trying to run forward, and it's all tangled up.
So does it have like a shut off? Like if all the balloons are popped, it stops all?
There's only one balloon, and yes. So this is literally the power switch. So you
So it
might
doesn't
be able
shut
to
off
see
the
the
other
LED blink.
robots when it's the last one. It'll keep going. if
It'll
it's the
keep
last
going,
one.
but in theory, the radio stream tells you robot 1, its XY position, its facing, and if it's alive or dead. And so you know that you're the last one in it. That doesn't mean your code's going to pay attention to that. You could flail around in circles and you might statistically win. I don't know yet. That's the thing with this. And then, that's I think part of the fun of it too is that little like wheel slippage, little random chance modifiers.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. Rick.
Yeah, thank you very much.
If you're interested, I'm Swit on GitHub. Robot Knife Fight is the project. Racktivision is the other piece of software involved, and any events will be posted on i3detroit.com.
Cool. Super. Thank you.